Hi ladies, I'm Pidge.
And I'm Moen.
Welcome to the Night Shift Court podcast. We are two shift-working fantasy book lovers and love nothing more than leaving reality behind for a bookish adventure.
Join us as we go under the mountain to discuss our favourite fantasy fiction tales and the authors behind them.
Come with us to explore the stories, one shift at a time. Hi ladies.
Hi! Welcome back. Thumbs up.
Great. It gets better and more ridiculous
And worse,
each
yeah.
time. Love it.
I can't stop now. Can't stop,
No.
won't stop.
You've
Welcome
started.
back. It's episode 15.
Yeah.
1-5. And we're going to be revisiting chapters 16 through 20 today of A Court of Mist and Fury, book 2 in the ACOTAR series. Welcome back. If you haven't listened to the rest of our bookish podcast episode,
Episode 1.
we invite you to go back to episode 1 to revisit all of the magical goodness that is this Masterverse series.
Let's get into it.
Let's.
We finished off last time and Rhys and Feyre had their little argument on the balcony about him flying her up to the House of Wind versus walking up the 10,000 steps. And she was like, I'm going to walk 10,000 steps.
No.
She is really what I aspire to be in terms of just doing 10,000 steps like that.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
no.
you know, her goal would be achieved on her
That's exactly
Apple
right.
Watch. Yeah.
Yeah, the Fey version of an Apple Watch. Yeah. Anyway, so they arrive at the House of Wind. They're looking lovely. They turn around and they see two very large figures in
Very large.
in the door, way inside the dining room. And one of their first words to Feyre is, "Come on, Feyre, we don't bite unless you ask us to." What an introduction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cassian and Azrael, they are dark and mysterious. We don't learn a lot about them in too much detail to begin with, but what I love about how they are with Feyre is it's like an instant, you are under my wing.
Yeah.
In regards to how we just envelop you and put you in the inner circle.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's
that's
like
right.
instant family, really.
Yeah. So Feyre walks in and I made a note that one of the first things that she thinks is that the Illyrians are all blessed with good looks.
Yeah. Well, these three are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she does describe Cassian. She describes him as shoulder length, black hair,
Mm-hmm.
tall, rough, and sort of describes him as though he's made of wind, earth, and flame.
Yes.
Which is such a powerful description.
Yeah.
It's more descriptive to me than describing his physical features,
Yes.
isn't it?
Because you can feel those earthly, elemental feelings.
Yes. Yeah.
And you get a sense of someone's actual identity.
Yeah. And Azrael is the more classically beautiful of the two. She does note Cassian has the red siphons.
Yes.
Azrael has sort of a cobalt blue siphons.
Yep.
He's got very, very scarred hands as well, which
Yeah.
she sort of makes note of, but doesn't do anything with that information. She just
Yeah.
files it away.
Yeah. So the thing that got me about this is the siphons that I could never really get my head around until I did some reading about what they actually are.
Okay.
So if you're having trouble visualizing that, they're basically stones that glow, that they wear gauntlets on their hands and the stones are embedded in these gauntlets and they glow. I always visualized them as like things that were swirling around.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what I thought a siphon was, but I perhaps thought it was like this being
Okay.
that accompanied them.
Wow.
But now I know otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I must admit I pictured them exactly
Good.
like you described. Good. Like the normal version.
Just me, probably.
Yeah, like a gemstone
Yes.
or a jewel, sort of slightly see-through but coloured.
Yes.
Yeah. And they have 8. I think it's 8 or 7.
I think it's actually 7.
Yeah. Anyway, Moore arrives. It's time for dinner. Everyone's starving. They all go into the dining room.
Yes.
And I know back a few episodes ago, somebody asked me what my favourite female character was in the series, and my answer was Moore.
Yes.
However, I have changed my mind.
Amren.
Yeah, it's Amren, yeah.
Stop it.
So in my research that I've been doing for the cast,
Yes.
I have paid close attention to her.
Yep.
And she is actually my new favourite.
Look, this actually doesn't surprise me because when I think about like how sassy and mysterious and, for lack of a better word, odd and against the grain. I'm like, yeah, she's your cup of tea.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
And rude, like Nesta.
Yeah,
Rude.
really harsh.
Yeah. So, no, I really like her. So,
Okay.
anyway, I love her entrance. She arrives and she sniffs Feyre, like, to begin with. Yeah, like gives her like a really obvious inhale near her, which, I mean, for Feyre is like,
Okay.
you know, if someone actually did that to you. Yeah. But once you get to know Amren and or lack of knowledge about who and what she actually is, that's a very Amren thing to do.
Yes.
Anyway, so she looks Feyre up and down, and Feyre's main instinct is to run.
Yeah.
She's this petite little thing with cropped dark hair.
A little bob.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she's got these piercing silver eyes.
Yeah.
And she says to Feyre, there are now 2 of them that have been made and found themselves in strange new bodies.
Yes. She's a pocket rocket, silver eyes. Yes, 2 strange beings trapped in strange bodies.
Yeah. She does mention a 3rd being as well. So we hear the name Miriam
Yes.
for the first time. So we will get into Miriam and Draken as well shortly. However, the name Miriam is just mentioned to begin with.
Yeah.
But they do all file onto the table now to sit down for dinner.
It's very, very noted that Amren doesn't eat normal food.
Yeah, yes. And again, she very obviously sniffs Feyre at the dinner table and looks to Rhys, and he gives like a single nod of his head. I think, based on a few situations that I've read about Amren, that she can read people's minds or communicate mind to mind as well.
Yep.
And I think that this is one of, and Rhys knows that to an extent.
Yep.
And so I actually think that she asks Rhys, is she your mate? And Rhys gives a single nod.
If not, Amren's so clever, she knows that Rhys can enter minds. So she's giving him the information willingly, shields down.
Like
if she
thinking
can shield,
it. Yeah.
thinking it. He's obviously in her and in himself.
Oh.
Please. She did laugh just like that when Rhys asked her to go to bed one time. Amren did not want Rhys. Can't relate.
No.
But you know what I mean?
Yes,
so like
yeah,
he's potentially doing all of it.
Yeah.
But
Well, she knows he's like monitoring the minds of everybody.
for sure.
So she thinks it and then,
I
he
wonder
nods.
what she thinks.
Yeah. Moore does what I would absolutely love to be able to do, which is snaps her fingers and dinner appears.
Fuck yeah.
As a mum, I can fully relate.
Yes. And also how I like to relate things back to Harry Potter.
Here we go. I'm ready.
Let the feast begin.
Yes.
And the great hall just filled with
food.
delicious looking turkey. You know how Ron picks up a...
Yes, I do.
That's my ultimate dream. Speaking of...
Go ahead.
We'll probably cut this
Receiving.
out, but anyway. Did you see that thing that I sent you that you can spend a night in Hogwarts?
Look, I saw it, but I was busy with the actual podcast.
I'm so... Okay. All right.
So maybe in our break we'll have a wee look at that.
Yes, all right. I've been put back in my box.
By Amren.
Anyway.
By Amren of the ambulance service. Okay, so Amren is pushing around her food on her plate. Feyre notes that, she doesn't pick up anything, doesn't eat it. She again looks to the siphons and Rhys explains what they actually are and what they do. So Feyre makes her first blunder of the evening and she doesn't know how to refer to Cassian because he's obviously not high Fey, right? Because he's got animalistic features, which we'd talked about before, that the lesser Fey are the ones that are strange looking. So she knows he's not high Fey, but he is humanoid, right? He's pretty much completely human apart from the wings. Yeah. So she doesn't know what to call him. So she refers to him as Lord Cassian. And Cassian immediately spews his wine across the table all over Moore. Everyone has a bit of a snicker about that, and Feyre's feeling horribly embarrassed that she's broken some sort of court protocol and called him the wrong thing.
poor thing. I feel sorry for her. So naturally, Rhys then goes into the story about how they're not lords.
Yeah.
And Moore's the only person of his inner circle who actually has a title.
Yes. Yeah.
And he tells her that even he isn't considered high fae because he's half Illyrian.
Yes.
And his mother was the Illyrian.
Yes. Yeah.
None of the inner circle were under the mountain at all. And Amarantha didn't know that they existed, obviously didn't know Valaris existed, as does nobody.
Yep.
And Feyre realises that, you know, when she's examining the group dynamic, that they all feel very guilty that they weren't a part of that.
Yes.
And there's like a heaviness in relation to any time that they all talk about Under the Mountain. But yes, they're ultimately Cass and Az. They kind of just say, well, we're just Illyrian.
Yeah.
That's what we are.
Yeah, I felt the same reading this about the heaviness between them, because actually when I reread, Rhys, when he worked out what was happening, he used his mind to send a message to the minds of the other four, telling them what had happened, and he used their own magic to link them to Valaris's wards. So if they left Valaris, it would ruin the wards, and Amarantha, or like people would find out about Valaris essentially.
So he forced them there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He kept them there
Yep.
by using their own magic to do that. And we
Pretty
see that.
clever.
Yeah. We see it later when Rhys leaves Valaris. Amren is the one that remains, and it's her magic that powers the wards.
Right.
So I reckon that Amren manages the wards. Moore has always been the emissary to other courts, and specifically around managing the Court of Nightmares, which she knows she can't leave unchecked.
Yes.
And then Cassian is the one who is essentially the war leader. So
Yes.
he doesn't want to leave in case something happens. He needs to be around.
Yeah.
And then Azriel's the spy.
Yeah. So he goes everywhere.
Yeah, so he goes everywhere,
Yeah.
but to report back.
Yeah.
So I can sort of see how that was very intelligent by Rhys, because they all have a very key part to play in protecting
Yes.
Valaris and the Night Court. And so, yeah, he essentially uses that against them to protect them.
And it's ultimately because he absolutely knew that given the chance, they would abandon their post
Yes.
to come and assist him,
Yes.
which would have ended in not a good situation.
That's right.
No one was going to beat Amarantha except Feyre. So Rhys explains that Cass and Az aren't lords, but they go into like, you know, that they're both bastards. Azriel was the bastard of a local lord.
Yes.
And Cassian was the bastard of a war camp laundress and a random warrior.
Yeah.
So, you know, as you can imagine at a war camp, everyone's just doing what they can to
That's the
get
army
there.
for you, isn't it?
Yeah. And they say Illyrians hate bastards.
Yes.
Az was sent to Cassian's camp when his father realised he was a shadow singer.
Yes.
Obviously, shadow singers, wildly rare, coveted, and because they ultimately are stealthy, they have a predisposition to hear and feel things that should not otherwise be heard or felt.
So isn't it interesting that they explain what shadow singers are, but they don't, Sarah doesn't necessarily say this is what Azriel is. Like we know that he is. So what she's essentially saying, we know he's stealthy because he's a spy.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting was the predisposition to hear and feel things that others can't, because there's multiple times where Feyre notes that the shadows that sort of swirl around him like a hive sort of get closer, and he almost seems to like listen to them before they
leaning.
disperse.
Yeah, like whispers.
Yeah. So like, again, it makes me wonder what he is hearing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just his shadows off spying on everyone and they're coming back to tell him information.
Yeah.
I think he like hears people's intentions and things like that in conversation, as opposed to just hearing the words that they say.
Interesting. I also had a moment when I was re-listening to something in a couple of later chapters that I almost feel like his shadows speak to him in reassurance as well, because in relation to like how he observes characters that we know him to feel things about, his shadows seem to come close when he's feeling stressed or when he's feeling threatened. And I feel like they're probably saying things to him like, it's okay.
Yeah,
calm down.
yes.
Like,
yeah. Well, he probably uses them as a bit of a shield.
yeah, 100%.
Right? Like, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I wish I had that.
Yeah. Well, you wish you had Asriel, you know.
Well,
you could have both.
that would be nice.
Yeah. So Rhys's mother was lowborn,
Yes.
and a seamstress in the war camp as well, which is important to note because we learn later on that Feyre can't figure out where all these beautiful dresses are coming from.
Yeah.
Which, fair, I didn't actually think about it either. I
No,
just
same.
assumed that he got them from some sort of shop in Valaris, right?
Yeah.
They have so many beautiful wares
of course.
anyway.
Yeah.
But it turns out that his mother actually made them
Isn't
for
that
his
special?
future bride.
Oh,
yeah, which
Feyre,
is
darling.
yeah, literally Feyre, darling.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We learn about how Rhys's mum and dad met and that she was about to have her wings clipped, which they do to Illyrian females.
Yeah, so they normally do it quite early on.
Yeah.
And she managed to make herself scarce until she was 18
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's linked to when they bleed, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so she did everything that she could to avoid that. And they were just about to do it, and his dad materialised in the war camp, and the bond snapped into place instantly. And so he stopped that and winnowed her away. But it meant that, Rhys his mum and him could fly together, essentially.
Which is a part of a big memory, a core memory for Rhys.
Yeah.
So Cassian was sent to the camp as soon as he could walk, basically, and his mother was unfortunately worked to death. So he had a really brutal upbringing.
Yeah.
And when Rhys turned 8, his mother took him to the Illyrian camp to train.
Yes.
He was banned from using any magic. Obviously, he was skilled from a very young age. They knew that he was powerful, but he wasn't allowed to use it when he was training.
Yep.
He was put in the sparring ring on his very first day, and Cassian beat him to a pulp, basically. Cassian had absolutely nothing growing up. Bastards were made to find their own food, shelter, all of those things. They weren't...
Again,
they literally...
brutal.
I know. They were expected to just sleep out in the open on the dirt, and that's kind of how it happened until Rhys decided that he would just take Cassian home one day, and they weren't mates at this point. Like they hated each other for quite a while after that. And so his mother wasn't impressed that he'd brought this Illyrian warrior home, this young fella, but she's good-natured and she wasn't going to turn him away. So she gave him a bed.
Did she give him a bath too? She said something
I
like...
think they did. She did.
Yeah.
She's like, you must wash before you get in that bed,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can
Which,
relate.
as a mum of boys, can relate.
As a mum of a girl, I can relate.
Kids in general, huh?
Yeah. So she actually allowed him to stay and she tutored him.
Yeah.
So that's what, otherwise they're just brutes basically. They don't actually learn logistics or anything. They're just war grunts. So she actually tutored him about lots of things. And they basically hated each other until Asriel came to the camp the year later.
Yeah.
And then they were like the three stooges. But Cassian notes like he doesn't have any powers like Az and Rhys do. So he's obviously he has this war intelligence and he's like the greatest warrior even Rhys has ever seen.
Strategist in war. Yep.
Absolutely. But all three of them together obviously are incredibly powerful and bonded to each other for life.
And Cassian, I think, probably is a humble sort of man in that he knows that he owes probably quite a lot to Rhys's mum.
Definitely.
Because without her, he would probably still be at one of those camps.
100%.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been plucked out for anything special because he was just another soldier.
Yeah.
Even if he was strong, he'd be just running a war camp. Rhys was given a legion of the Illyrian to command, and Cass was put in a different one as a foot soldier. And Az was kept as the personal shadow singer. They barely saw each other over a 7-year war, and Rhys was captured, and then he immediately cuts that story off.
Yeah.
So we have this very big gap in our knowledge of what happened to Rhys after that time.
Yeah.
Obviously, we learn a bit more about that later, but I feel like there's a lot more to come in the next book.
Yes. After they tell all their stories and Feyre gets a bit of a better idea as to what she's dealing with and who she's going to be working with, she does agree to work with Rhys and the inner circle.
Yeah.
And Rhys reveals only after that he believes the King of Highburn has plans to resurrect Durian. If you will remember, all that we have of Durian is his finger bone, and his eye.
Yeah. So Rhys doesn't exactly know why the plans to resurrect Durian are a thing yet.
Yes.
He says the killings at the temples are connected somehow.
Yeah.
So the king's raided a temple in one of these 3 cities. One of them is called Sangravar 3 days ago. And he's like, it's evident he's looking for something. So they think that there's something in that. And they know that ACOTAR is probably responsible for fetching Durian's eye and the finger bone from under the mountain when he sort of disappeared.
Yes.
Prior to them all celebrating that Feyre had defeated Amarantha.
Which is funny, isn't it? Because we thought that the ACOTAR answered to Amarantha.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, I think
No.
the ACOTAR answers to the king.
Yeah, absolutely. Rhys expresses that he's not really sure if they can resurrect someone from just the eye and the finger bone and asks Amren, because Amren's obviously the oldest. She comes from somewhere.
Yes.
And if anyone knows, it would be her. And Amren says the only person that would probably know this information is the bone carver.
Yes. Yeah.
So the bone carver's in the prison.
Yeah.
And Amren says, you've got to go talk to him.
When Rhys reveals that he believes the king plans to resurrect Durian, that Amren pays close attention to that. And Feyre watches Asriel really focus on Amren when he reveals that, which is interesting given what we learn about Amren later on.
Yes.
Is that she herself is resurrected.
Yes. Can't wait. Can't wait. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Amren says the only person the bone carver's probably going to talk to is Feyre for reasons that are the bone carver wants things from people. Information. And
That he can't get from anyone.
that's right. So they have to offer up a bone, naturally, bone carver. And it's basically a like for a like question. So Rhys says, will you come? And Feyre agrees.
Yep. That's the end of their first dinner together, and Rhys flies Feyre back. We don't get any dialogue around the flying back scenario.
No.
Like she obviously flew up there, so he knows that that's a thing now.
Yeah.
They don't have to walk down the 10,000 steps after dinner, even though it'd be really good for your metabolism.
Absolutely.
So they get to the top of the townhouse, and Rhys says to Feyre, I love my people and my family. Do not think I wouldn't become a monster to keep them protected. She can really relate to that. She's starting to see the other side of Rhys, that they're not monsters like everyone else believes them to be.
It would be hard to even consider them monsters when you see how they behave as an inner circle.
Yeah.
The banter and the warmth and the family. This is like odd for Feyre because she has not had that at the Spring Court.
Yeah. And Rhys explains to her that when he, like we talked about before, when he used his powers to protect Feyres, he was actively monitoring the minds of anyone and everyone under the mountain who ever knew anything at all about the Night Court.
Yeah.
And any of like the trade ships and, all the people essentially that were to keep Feyres running. He was actively managing their minds, and as a result of that, he had very little power left to use against Amarantha.
Yes.
So he basically became her whore to stop her from asking more questions because he just didn't have enough left to be able to facilitate that and keep Feyres safe.
It's a very, very clever split of power and focus.
That night, Feyre has another nightmare, and Rhys actually is the one to wake her up from this nightmare. She goes and voms in the toilet. I mean, we've all been there. Rhys comes in and holds her hair back, and it's such the opposite of what Tamlin used to do when Feyre ran to vomit overnight. So he would just stay in bed and stay asleep, whereas Rhys was actively waking her up and
rubbing her back.
Yeah, and like holding her hair and stuff like that. So which is really sweet. She falls asleep in the bathroom, but she wakes up in the morning to being tucked back into bed with fresh sheets. Which is really sweet too.
Cute. So during the nightmare phase, Feyre has destroyed the bed in various capacity. Not just
in
the
the
bomb.
good way.
Not the good way at all.
No.
Rather than just there being, fresh sheets from the vom, she's actually scorched everything.
Yes.
So she's actually summoned her flame power in the bedroom. And
never. Don't do it. Not a good time.
It's not covered by insurance, most likely.
Not at all.
No. So she asks Rhys, where has this power come from?
Yeah.
And he says, likely the Autumn Court, because that's something that they're known for.
Yeah.
So all of these little skerricks of power she's got through being bestowed this from all of the High Lords in her resurrection. That's where she gets her flame powers from.
Yes. Right. So the next day, it's time to go to the prison.
Yes. So Rhys is winnowing them to the Western Isles, where they're going to the prison to see the bone carver.
Yep.
And the prison's inside a mountain.
Yes.
And it's, down and around and labyrinth-esque. It was made before all of the High Lords existed.
Yeah.
So this prison's been established and the infrastructure, albeit it's not built sort of thing. It's in the earth.
It's inside.
Yeah. So it's said to be home of the foulest and most dangerous criminals and creatures. Amren used to be a prisoner here. Whew.
Yes.
That was-
He describes it as an eighth court, doesn't he? With no
missed
height.
that.
Yeah. So he describes, I'm not sure if it's in this bit, but he does describe it. He sort of says it could be an eighth court.
Right.
With no High Lord, but it falls under his jurisdiction.
Because of where it's located.
Yeah.
Okay.
As opposed, so he's the one that does the sentencing
Interesting.
in there. Yeah.
Yes. So Amren used to be a prisoner. He says they have to walk into it.
And they can't winnow and they can't fly.
Yes, Feyre has another magical panic attack.
Yeah.
And she's like, I can't do this. And she, in her mind, is expected to be pushed to do it because that's what Tamlin would have done. But Rhys is like, okay, and takes her away. So Feyre is chilling back in her room. There's no shame in
what happened.
Like
Yeah.
Rhys is not bothered by it at all.
No. But she actually wakes up to Amren standing at the foot of her bed.
Freakish.
Yeah.
So Amren's all of a sudden just there waiting and Feyre's like, fuck it.
Yeah. I mean, like, for me, I'm like, that's amazing. I love Amren. She's just like, fuck that. You are going to the prison.
Yeah.
And I'm here to give you a gift.
It's like when your toddler's in your room, like staring over you, waiting for you to wake up. I'm like,
Yeah. Yes.
Amren gives Feyre this amulet and she says to her, this is going to protect you. Wear it. You'll be fine.
They can't keep you.
Yes. And gives her this false story.
This is why I've changed my mind.
So spoiler alert, the amulet
Means shit all.
absolutely fucking nothing, but Amren knows that Feyre needs something to cling on to. She needs this little safety blanket, even though Rhys is trying to prepare Feyre for all of the things that she is capable of. So
it says a lot to me that Amren, who Rhys described as like a fire drake who hoards like a dragon, I guess was what I likened her to, with like caves full of jewels, and that she only met Feyre the night or 2 nights before and knows what happened at the prison the first day to begin with, but second decides that she'll be the one to take it upon herself to fix the issue that Rhys is currently having, which is getting Feyre to move her legs towards the prison. So she makes up this false story, throws this amulet at her. And it says a lot to me about Amren's character. That she, that stuff has happened in the background and she's been the one to decide to just sort it out.
she's like, I'm on it.
With something that she holds so dear, her jewels.
Yeah, that it's her thing, right?
Well, I think she knows that Rhys told Feyre that she loves jewels. And it was obvious because he gifted her the brooch the other night.
Yes.
And so Feyre knows that Amren wouldn't give up one of her jewels or her necklace. You know. And so, whereas in actual fact, Amren's like, psych.
So good. I think I do remember reading though when she does reveal that there's no power to this amulet that she's like, oh, just have it. It was at the bottom of my cupboard anyway.
Yeah.
Like she's got fucking so much.
Yeah. She doesn't even really remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Feyre puts it on and she's like, cool, I've got this protection now. I'm good.
Yeah. I've got my protection, my PPE. Let's go. So they winnow again to the same spot. But this time Feyre is able to move her legs and they start walking towards the prison.
She notes Rhys has got his sword with him and have this dialogue whilst they're getting into the prison, and Rhys makes a note of telling Feyre, don't discuss anything that you don't want anyone else to hear because they have nothing better to do and they will be listening.
Yeah. He tells Feyre the story about Asriel's scars
Yeah.
on his hands. So he has two older legitimate brothers. Poor Asriel. He was kept in a cell with no windows, no light, and only allowed outside for 1 hour a day and to see his mum for 1 hour a week.
Oh.
And his two older brothers decided to test an Illyrian's quick healing skills with oil and fire. Feyre asks if they were punished for this, and Rhys's only answer to that is eventually. So we don't actually know if they're still alive or dead.
Yeah. But he took care of it.
Yeah.
Or someone took care of it.
Yeah. He describes the inner circle's roles as well.
Yeah. So we have obviously Cassian described as the best warrior, and Feyre asks if he and Cass, if they were fighting hand to hand, who would win?
Yes.
And Rhys is like, Cassian would absolutely win. He is the best warrior I've ever seen, and they do train together all the time, but Cass would definitely win in hand-to-hand combat.
Rhys is humble. He knows that.
Yeah. Then Feyre asks about Moore and what her role is.
Yep.
And Rhys says, she's the person I will call in when my armies fail and Cassian and Asriel are dead. She's the third and she's the court overseer. So as we've said, she manages the dynamics between the Court of Nightmares and the Court of Dreams.
Yep.
And she runs Valaris and she runs the Hewn City.
Yeah.
And he likens that as in the mortal realm, she would be considered a queen.
And then he says something super interesting about Amren. Firstly, he says, when Feyre asks him about her being his second, he says, she was my ally, maybe a friend, long before that. And it made me think about, when did they meet? How did they meet? And what that story is. I'm desperate to know what the relationship between Amren and Rhys has been in the last, well, Rhys is 500 years old, but Amren is much, much older than that. So I'm just, again, it's just such a mystery. We get little bits of information.
Not enough.
No. And Feyre actually asks what happens when Cassian, Asriel and Moore are dead.
Yeah.
And Rhys says, I'll find a way to break the spell on Amren and unleash her on the world and ask her to end me first.
Yeah. Oh, goosebumps.
So first, again, what is the story? Because so there's a spell on Amren, right? Unleash her on the world, which gives me vibes that she is incredibly dangerous in whatever form she is in. And that she is something else. And when Feyre asks that, he says, something else, something worse than us.
Yeah, it gives me serious goosebumps because it's so mysterious. And then she's just like this pocket rocket that gets around and is sassy and drinks blood and, you know, she's just Amren. Yeah. Speaks really coolly and, oh, I tell you.
I can't wait to hear or to find out more information about her because we don't actually learn a huge amount.
No. I hope it's coming in the next one. I feel like the timeline between now and when the next book is set to publish, that there's not enough time for a big one. So I almost feel like it'll be a novella.
Yeah.
And I feel like it'll be Amren's novella.
So. I've got everything crossed.
So they enter the prison.
They do. And while they're still talking, while they're walking down, Feyre keeps questioning Rhys about Amren. And he says that Amren's prison stay, so we know she was a prisoner, predating the written word, and that he believes that she's the only one of her kind. So again, I'm going to link Asriel and Amren together because Rhys says, Asriel looked into it once. So I actually think Asriel knows a shitload more about Amren than either he tells Rhys, or maybe he did tell Rhys and they're both keeping it a secret. But I think Asriel knows a shitload more about her than he's letting on.
Probably.
Rhys says that there's some theories or like legends that when the worlds were actually created, that there were rips in the fabric where monsters could come through and that those rips would close at their own will, so that some of them got stuck here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that he describes these holes as rips in the fabric because he also describes winnowing in the same way, that you're stepping from one piece of the cloth to the other.
Yeah.
So I wonder if those things are linked together.
Yeah. Oh,
Interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah. So Feyre asks what the bone carver is, and Rhys says he doesn't actually know because the bone carver appears to everyone as something different.
That creeps me out.
Yeah. And it especially is creepy when you know what they appear to these two as.
Yeah.
So you could be standing next to one another and you, like I would, similarly to a boggart in Harry Potter.
Yep.
Your greatest fear will manifest as whatever your greatest fear is, and mine will be mine.
Mine's wet paper, if that helps. Hate it.
Wet paper. Fear. Fear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moving on.
Yeah. So Rhys opens the prison door and they go in, and Feyre sees the bone carver as a little boy. Dark hair, blue eyes. Rhys chucks a bone at him and says, the calf bone that made the final kill when Feyre killed the Midgard worm in the task under the mountain.
Yeah. How did he get that bone?
I don't know, but Feyre is like,
how did you get that bone?
but also like she is so impressed. Is that the right word even? That anyone cared enough to even know which bone made the final kill. Because Feyre didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
So she's really impressed by that.
So the bone that is offered up must be a bone of significance, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be any bone because there was many bones in that trench.
Oh,
from
so
the
do you
people
think it
that he'd
belongs
eaten.
to somebody significant?
Well, potentially. I just made a note that it can't just be any bone.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't have just gone down to the butcher in Valaris and said, give me a bone from one of the animals. Do you know what I mean? Like it had to be a significant bone.
Yeah.
So it's either that it potentially could be something because again, nothing Sarah writes is random. So it could be that particular bone belongs to somebody or it could just have to be a significant bone.
Okay. So Rhys has told Feyre, never lie.
Yeah.
Do not lie to the bone carver. He's also instructed her that it'll be a question for question.
Yeah.
So she needs to be very, very careful with how she formulates her sentences. She need not react. She needs to like internalize everything so that she doesn't roguely ask a question that is not of significance because they're there to find out some serious shit. So he says where the bone carver asks Feyre where she went when she died.
Yes.
And she says, after she sort of takes herself back because she's like, right, I can't lie. I need to put myself in a place where I don't really want to revisit.
Yeah.
So she says, I heard the crack of my neck on my spine and I was gone before I could feel more than a lash of pain. She says to the bone carver, it was dark and she saw or felt a tether, a thread, and then she yanked on it so that she could come back. She knew that she wanted to come back.
Yeah.
But she couldn't tell the bone carver anything about if there was anyone there, what
He's particularly interested in where she went and what happened after that, isn't he? All of his questions are centred around that particular time in between when she died and when she came back.
Yeah. He goes a bit rogue with questions and she continues to answer them.
Yeah.
And it's all around the same theory. Yeah. So she's like adding them up. And what she wants to ask him is, why do you want to know this? But she internalizes that.
Yeah.
And so, so it's really interesting. He's very fixated on it.
Yeah. She describes the tether that you described. She says that she pulled on it or tugged on it and the way she describes it is, I knew that home was at the other end.
Yeah.
Not life.
Home.
But home.
Ooh.
Which I think would have been particularly hurtful is not the right word to Rhys.
Yeah.
Because he knows that the reason that she feels like home is at the other end is because she was not pulling on the bargain bond, but she was pulling on the mating bond.
Yes.
And that he is her home at the other end. But
Aww.
she doesn't know that yet.
No. Come on, Feyre, get rid of the program. Yeah. She explains that she could see everything through Rhys's eyes and she knew she was dead, but she was holding on to this like tiny skerrick of her spirit. And when she was made anew, she followed the thread back to her body. He asks if she saw anything else, like he's probing her, all the things.
Yep.
And Rhys is like, hold on.
Stand by.
that's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And he like does a mental tally and I think there's 6.
Yeah.
So they then quiz the bone carver about the things that they really are there for.
So we learn about the cauldron as well, which is the first time we hear of it, other than people saying,
Cauldron boil me.
Or, cauldron save me or whatever,
Yes.
which we, I guess, originally assumed was just a magical thing, right? Like it's just a saying, but the cauldron is an actual thing.
Yeah.
The bone carver reveals that long ago it fell into the wrong hands and great and terrible things were done with it. It was stolen back but could never be destroyed.
So it was hidden. Then he confirms that basically, yes, the cauldron is possibly the only thing that could reforge something that was already dead.
And so the cauldron sits on 3 legs, and what they did was they broke or cleaved the legs off the cauldron.
Yep.
And those legs, what are you laughing at?
Because it's just funny. I'm imagining this bowl like
Oh my God. Like Kool-Aid Man. So the legs were taken off and hidden in the temples.
Yeah.
So that's how Rhys is able to connect the dots to say the King of Highburn is looking for the legs for the cauldron.
Yes.
To be able to make it complete again. So
Yeah.
taking off those legs reduced or diminished its power to an extent, but not very much.
Yeah, so they need all the bits in order to do anything with it.
That's right.
So the 3 little legs of the cauldron were dispersed
Correct.
in 3 different temples.
Yes.
Césaire, Sangravar, and Ithaca. If the feet had been taken, he says it's likely someone has the cauldron and wants to be able to use it at its full power.
Yep.
So that's why he was like, right, I think the King of Hyburn's looking for the cauldron.
legs.
He already knows all of this, right? He's just looking for the bone carver to actually confirm this.
it, yeah.
So he knows Sangravar was raided.
Yep.
He knows the King of Hyburn's looking for something.
Yep.
He suspects he wants all the bits of the cauldron so that it's all full.
Complete.
Yeah.
And the cover also reveals that you can do more than resurrect with a complete cauldron, but you could shatter the wall as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which Rhys, I guess he already knows that was the king's intention
Yes.
overall. I'm not really sure yet why resurrecting Durian. I think resurrecting Durian is a test to see if the cauldron, if it actually works.
Yeah.
So that's sort of all part of it. But in order to reveal that, the carver asks for a truth from the High Lord of the Night Court.
Yes.
And Rhys reveals his secret about his knee.
Sometimes.
Which is such a Rhys personality thing to do, isn't it? Like Feyre's like, okay, I'm ready to hear the most horrendous thing about what he's done to protect the court. It's actually just about his sore knee.
My knee niggles sometimes when it rains. Or What
Yeah.
does he say? Like,
It's like twinges when it gets a twinge of pain when it rains because he
same.
wrecked it in the war.
same.
So the carver reveals, for Rhys's intricate secret about his knee, he reveals that when the cauldron was made, there was some leftover ore or metal, I guess, and that was used to make something called the Book of Breathings.
Yes.
And the Book of Breathings is a book that has spells within it to negate the power of the cauldron.
Oof.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it can essentially neutralise it.
Yep.
The book was broken in half after the war.
Okay.
One half was kept by the Fae. The other half was given to the 6 human queens.
Yes.
So the half that's kept by the Fae is protected by the High Lord of Summer
Yes.
Court. And the human queens had the Fae spell, as in put a spell on their half that said that if the book was ever stolen, it would melt. So it had to be freely given
Yeah.
by one of the queens, one of
Okay.
the 6 of them. So I guess the idea was that they potentially knew that someone may come to steal the book. And as mortals, they had very limited power to protect it.
Yes.
So against the Fae.
Yeah.
So they had the Fae spell it for that reason.
Yeah.
However, it was just a pretty symbolic gesture because the book can only be used by someone who or something that is made. And you can't make anything without the cauldron, if
Yes.
that makes sense. So it's kind of a circle.
It is a circle,
Yeah.
except
Except.
for Feyre.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Can we just have a moment of appreciation for Sarah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, when you read something like that, you're like, yes, absolutely, it makes sense. But someone has physically taken something out of their brain and put it on paper, and this is what we're dissecting here.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And made a way to explain it that is incredible.
And it all makes sense. There's no plot holes.
No, that's right.
If anyone has found a plot hole in this series, let me know, because you see it in movies all the time. There's so many plot holes, but this is tight.
Yes. Yeah.
I love it.
She has an incredible talent, doesn't she?
Yeah. So they go to leave.
Yeah.
And they're discussing who they appeared as, who the bone carver appeared as.
Yeah.
And Feyre says, you know, a small boy, dark hair, blue eyes.
About 8 years old.
8 years oldish. And Rhys says the bone carver appeared to him as Durian.
Which is interesting.
How did Mr. Bone Carver know anything about what they were coming there to discuss?
So I think he did after they started asking questions about resurrecting with just the eye and the finger bone.
Of course.
But he appeared as Durian to Rhys as he came in the door.
Yeah.
Before they'd even asked a single question. And also they breeze over the fact that this 8-year-old boy is who appears as Feyre, right? We never get any more context.
No.
And I think we're so focused on everything that we just learned that we don't focus on that.
Yeah.
And it's not until later that I realised
Who it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we going to tell people?
No, let's move on.
Okay, Roger. If you know, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they we don't get any dialogue around how they get back, but they're back in the sitting room of the townhouse. More Cassian and Azriel are there waiting for them. And in typical Rhys fashion, he says, you guys are like dogs waiting for me to come home. Maybe I should buy treats.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I can also really just imagine them being bored out of their brain until Rhys gets back and then they're like, hi.
Yeah, they've been waiting.
Yeah. So Azriel offers his contacts at the summer court to go and investigate the fact that they know that part of the book is in the summer court somewhere. Yep. Rhys declines this because he doesn't trust anyone with the information. Yeah. He doesn't want that investigated. So they focus their attention on the other half of the book that is protected by the mortal queens.
He wants to establish a home base in the mortal world or the mortal realm where he can meet or they can meet with the 6 queens. And Feyre suggests that it should be her family's estate.
Which makes sense, but is not going to be easy.
No, that's right.
Because Nest is there.
Yeah. Satan's apprentice.
So they're talking about the fact that Feyre's got these potential summoning powers to magical things that are to do with nullifying the cauldron or things that are made. And Rhys wants to test the theory about whether or not Feyre has this skill.
Yep.
So again, he wants her to use her potential tracking skills to track something that is special / magical to him because he's like, I don't want to test this
on the book.
On the book because that's silly. If it doesn't work, then what now?
Yeah.
So he's like, right, I've got something that someone else has.
Yep.
And I want you to try and track it. So he wants to take her to
the Weaver of the Wood.
The Weaver of the Wood. If I had to choose, other than the Surreal, my favourite lesser fairy / villain, it would be the Weaver of the Wood.
Yeah, okay, yep.
And we learn about the relationship between some of these beasts later on.
Yes, yep.
So they're off to go and see if Feyre can identify the object in the Weaver's trove.
Yeah. So that morning she wakes up and Rhys knocks on her door immediately when she opens her eyes, which obviously he's in tune with every little movement of hers. Yeah. If he can ascertain when she's opened her eyes in the morning. So he breezes on through the door. Well, he knocks, but he breezes on through. The knock was nothing. And he starts pulling out her clothes and her boots and stuff for her.
Get ready, bitch.
Yeah. Yeah. He pulls out her underthings and he waves them. Which I love. And she snatches them away from him and she's like, you're drooling on the carpet. Storms into the bathroom to get dressed. She comes out and he spreads out the harness for her. We discussed before what this thing was called. And I picture it as the thing that you put on before you go skydiving. The thing with the carabiner on it.
Yeah, I just feel like it's a weapon belt.
But she has to step through it with her legs.
Okay.
Like, or rock climbing, the thing you put on.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what I picture it. But like leather with knives and stuff all
Roger.
attached to it. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway,
So, yes, Rhys gives her this belt of knives or whatever you'd like to call it. Weirdo.
rock climbing belt. Yeah.
And he says she can't take a bow, arrows, or a sword, but the weaver won't notice if she brings knives.
Yep.
So he tells her not to make a sound while she's in the weaver's home, tells her only to touch the object that belongs to Rhys, which she doesn't know what it is, but he thinks that she can summon it or track it.
Yeah. She can feel it.
Yeah. The weaver is blind, but her other senses are lethal. Rhys can't grab the item himself because the weaver knows him, but also High Lords are not allowed to interfere with her. So it's either Feyre gets it or nobody does.
Yeah. And I just have to bring this up now because I feel like it's so relevant, is that she gets a ring, right? The item is this ring.
Yes.
And when she gets it and he says, oh, my mother gave it to the weaver for safekeeping, the only thing I could think about was, so what? Did your mother just turn up to the weaver's house and be like, hey,
Can you look after this?
can you look after this? Like how?
Probably.
Yeah.
Because, okay, High
Like, there's a
Lords
story-
can't interfere.
There's a story there.
Yeah.
Like, how did the weaver actually get this ring in the first place?
It was probably used as payment to release something else, surely. I
Maybe.
don't know, but very interesting.
Yeah. So Rhys winnows them to like an ancient looking wood where all the trees are like intertwined and linking together. It's very creepy and creaky and scary. He tells her that there's no High Lord here and that the hierarchy is actually established by who is strongest, and the Weaver of the Wood is at the top of the food chain.
Interesting because, female sitting in her little cabin.
I aspire to be the Weaver of the Wood, right?
What, just to be alone in the woods with your little craft corner?
Yes.
100%.
Exactly what I want.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even mind being blind. I would adapt.
Your other senses would in fact be lethal.
Yes.
So before this, Cassian has pleaded with Rhys not to take Feyre.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Rhys says to Feyre, because Cassian's probably more interested in sleeping with you than saving you.
Yeah. He wants her to hang around, not die.
Yeah.
By the Weaver.
I think that's a way of Rhys testing Feyre to see if she's ready for being intimate with anyone else.
Yeah.
And they joke and she's like, okay, we'll tell Cassian to come to my room tonight.
Yes.
And he's like, okay. And inside he'd be like, oh, fuck.
Shriveling. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also a way for him to just distract her.
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
what's going on.
That's
just
right.
to make up something that is so not even what Feyre is thinking about.
Yeah.
She's never had a thought about Cassian and that they could be together.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So he just kind of takes something which to her is so far-fetched and starts a conversation about it.
So she's brewing on this and she's like, hold on, Rhys did that on purpose.
Yeah. But then he actually withers inside.
He's like,
when she says
fuck.
that. He's like, regret. Deep regret.
It's like, have I planted a seed I didn't want to plant?
Yeah.
So they reach the Weaver's cottage and she can hear the song.
Yes.
And I must say the graphic audio is epic in this section because the Weaver's voice is similarly to all of the other things that are happening in the graphic audio, both beautiful and chilling.
Yeah, okay.
Because obviously the lyrics of this song are disgusting as far as what the concept is.
Yes.
But the voice is really beautifully feminine, clear, and it just the humming in the background's chilling.
Sounds like they nailed it.
They did nail it.
Yeah. Rhys actually bows before the cottage in typical Rhys fashion. He bows. He's like, go ahead. And again, Feyre makes a vulgar gesture at Rhys. And we had discussed previously what we believe Feyre's vulgar gesture to look like. And this one I picture as a little bit like that.
Fair.
You know what I mean? A more expressive middle finger than normal.
Yeah.
Which, again, I just love. That seems to be their little thing that she gives him a vulgar gesture.
Yeah.
She sneaks into the cottage and gives a description from the back. So the weaver's actually sitting with her back to the door and the door's slightly cracked. So again, just tempting the people to come and test her.
Yep.
She describes her as having dark onyx hair, wearing a pretty grey dress, and she's spinning yarn
Yes.
as well.
Yarn?
Well, she's spinning something into yarn.
Yes.
And when I read chapter 20, the only thing that I could keep thinking of was that Sarah has taken Hansel and Gretel,
Stop it. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Santa Claus, and Rumpelstiltskin and smashed them together.
Yeah.
Because Rumpelstiltskin is he turns wool into gold, but on one of those wheels.
Yes.
The Hansel and Gretel thing, right?
Yep, definitely.
It's pretty obvious. And then Feyre's got to go up the chimney to get out. Like Santa has to get up the chimney to get out. I feel like Sarah's had a wild dream.
Yeah.
And somehow made this work.
Definitely Hansel and Gretel vibes to the point where this scene makes me anxious.
Yeah, okay.
Like,
No, I love it.
do you?
Yeah,
yeah,
she's got
but
like
you are a manacled fan, so
she's got like a wall of like jars of stuff.
yeah, of bits.
Yeah. People. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh my God, stop it.
But she's got like odds and ends, like sticks and acorns
Yeah.
and hair and just all this other stuff, which I'm quite
Fond of.
a little bit. So Feyre's creeping around this cottage looking for, this item, which we know is a ring, but she doesn't know
She doesn't know that yet.
She feels nothing. She starts to think about how Rhys and her are the same. And like in her head, she starts to just have this separate conversation where she starts to think about her and Rhys being the same.
Yeah.
And then she feels the item.
Yeah.
So she doesn't feel anything because she's not trying to tap into Rhys at all.
Yes.
And then she just has her own thought in her head about her and Rhys and how much they've sacrificed for their lives and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then she starts to feel the presence of
Yes.
the ring.
And I love it because she describes it as if something taps her shoulder.
Yeah, yes.
And I was like, oh, so naturally you would turn and you would look and then she sees like something like beckoning her.
Yes.
And almost chatting to her. And it's a ring, twisted strands of gold and silver flecked with pearl and set with a stone of deep blue.
Yeah. So I imagine it to be beautiful. I've seen some interpretations of it over the years.
Yes.
And
you can actually buy replicas.
oh, can you? I didn't
Yes.
know that. There you go.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting about this description of the ring was just before she describes the ring, Sarah makes note of saying that it's on a shelf slightly above her eye line. So she looks up. She sees all the odds and ends, like the hair and, the sticks and whatever. But she also sees a tarnished crown of ruby and jasper and a ring. And again, I don't think anything Sarah writes is coincidental. The fact that
100%.
she's described this crown.
Yep.
I actually have read the whole series and I don't know where it links in, but I feel like the fact that she's mentioned it.
Yeah, it's significant.
That it is significant and it somehow will tie back in later, not necessarily in this series, but potentially in another one.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps too. So she grabs this beautiful ring and as she does, the weaver stops singing.
That's it for this episode of the Night Shift Court podcast. Join us for next week's episode where we will continue the adventure from ACOTAR's Book 2, A Court of Mist and Fury.
Whichever platform you're listening on, we would so appreciate if you could give us a 5-star review. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Night Shift Court.
I hope the night is kind.